Some houses hold secrets, buried so deep within their walls that they are never meant to be uncovered. But what happens when those secrets refuse to stay hidden? What if one day in the place you call home, you start to hear things that shouldn't be there, scratching, whispering, the soft sound of breathing, coming from inside your own walls? This is the true story of a man who was found inside his own walls, a case so disturbing that even seasoned investigators were left haunted by what they uncovered. A story of isolation, obsession, and the horrors that can take root in the spaces we think are empty. But the most chilling part, this man was never reported missing. No one came looking for him, because as far as the world knew, he had never left his home. The story of the man who was found inside his own walls is far from unique. Across the world, there are tales of people vanishing, only to be discovered in the most unimaginable places. But it is in the ancient myths and forgotten folklore that we find the key to understanding these horrors. In cultures across time, there has been a legend of the buried ones, individuals who, by their own choice or by fate's cruel hand, are sealed away from the world. In some accounts, they are victims of a curse. In others, they are the willing subjects of forbidden rites meant to bind their souls in eternal solitude. One particular legend from Eastern Europe tells of a dark ritual passed down through generations, meant to imprison a person's essence within the walls of their own home. The ritual was said to leave no trace, no signs of the person's disappearance, only a subtle distortion in the fabric of reality itself. It was said that those who performed it could hear faint whispers, scratching noises, and even muffled cries coming from behind the walls, long after the person was gone. It began on a quiet, unremarkable night. The Holloway residence, an old, neglected house, stood on the outskirts of the town, almost forgotten by time. The family had been living there for years, in peace, or so it seemed. But that peace would soon shatter when the disappearance of its owner became the catalyst for something far darker. John Holloway, a man like any other, or so it seemed, a reclusive figure who had grown more distant in recent months, whispering to himself late into the night. His neighbors had long suspected something was off, but no one dared to speak of it. Not until the day he disappeared without a trace. It wasn't until a week after his disappearance that the first unsettling clues surfaced. The house, once silent, began to hum with strange vibrations, whispers, thumping sounds, and faint scratching from the walls. At first, the police thought it was nothing more than a fluke. Perhaps the house was settling. But then, there were more sounds, clearer, more deliberate, almost as if someone was trapped inside, trying desperately to break free. It was then that they found it. Behind one of the walls in the basement, a hidden room, a crawl space barely big enough for a man to fit. The air inside was thick, musty, suffocating, and there in the corner, they found the body of John Holloway, alive but changed. His skin was pale, his eyes wide open in a silent scream. His body had been consumed by the walls themselves. But this was only the beginning of their descent into madness. As the investigators tried to make sense of the scene, an even darker truth began to unravel. Holloway's body wasn't the first to vanish into these walls. No, this house had a history steeped in fear, one that spanned generations. The house had stood long before John Holloway ever stepped foot inside it, and before him, many others had disappeared. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the house's past, a past stained with tragedy and whispered rumors of a curse. It was said that the original owners, a family by the name of Green, had been the first to fall victim to the walls. The house seemed to feed on them, literally, as if the very structure had a hunger of its own. The whispers continued. The house, it eats. It doesn't take lives, not directly. It swallows them whole, feeding on their fear. The tragedy was that no one ever truly vanished. They were consumed, swallowed by the house, pulled into the walls themselves. As the police scoured the house for answers, they began to notice something disturbing: symbols etched into the walls, cryptic marks that seemed to throb with a life of their own. At first, they were dismissive, chalking it up to vandalism. But as they traced the symbols, an unnerving realization set in. They were not random. These were the same symbols found in ancient texts, occult manuscripts, and forgotten tombs. Symbols of containment, of binding dark forces, of sacrifice. What they had uncovered was no longer just the case of a missing man. They had stumbled upon a curse, an ancient malevolent force that had twisted this house into something monstrous, a living prison. Holloway's body was merely a symptom of the dark power lurking within the walls, and now it had set its sights on them. They tried to leave, they truly did, but the house, this abomination, refused to let them. With each step they took, the walls seemed to shift, to close in around them. The front door that had once been a clear escape route now stood locked, the key nowhere to be found. Desperation turned to panic as they realized they were no longer in control. It was then that they made the horrifying discovery: the bodies. Dozens of them, each one contorted in grotesque positions, their faces frozen in expressions of unimaginable terror, all trapped within the walls, all victims of this malevolent entity that had ensnared them. The true horror of the house became clear. It didn't just consume its victims, it transformed them, turning them into part of its malevolent structure. The walls themselves were a prison, a crypt, a feeding ground. The officer's scream was cut short, swallowed by the house as if it had never been. What had once been human was now just another offering to the walls, another lost soul trapped in the house's insatiable hunger. They say the house chooses its victims carefully, that it waits for the moment of weakness, the moment when fear becomes a door, and once opened, you can never leave. Some say the house now calls out for more, for those who dare to uncover its secrets. It waits, patient and hungry, to feed on the next soul foolish enough to step inside. The house remains silent, watching, waiting, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead have become indistinguishable, a place where the horrors of the past are bound within its walls, eternally trapped. What truly happened to those who entered the house? The officers, the families before them? Did they simply vanish, or were they consumed, lost forever to the dark hunger of the walls? Some say the house no longer calls, that its hunger has been sated for now. But others, they still hear the whispers, still see the faint flicker of shadows in the corners of their rooms. The walls, they say, are always waiting. So I leave you with this question: would you dare to step inside, to uncover the secrets buried within the walls? Or will you listen, like so many before you, to the silent warning that comes with every creak, every whisper, that some doors should never be opened? Think twice before entering places that are better left forgotten, for not all walls are meant to be crossed.